Amish Tripathi, who is a celebrated author, Shiv Bhakt, and his Shiva Trilogies have made history. Listen in. We are joined by Amish Tripathi, the author of the famed Shiva Trilogy, a proud Shiv Bhakt himself. Thank you very much for speaking to us on this epical day, really. Amish Tripathi, the Supreme Court also weighing in today. I want to ask you some more fundamental questions. Tell us about the significance of Kashi Vishwanath Temple to Hindus, to the faith, to Hindu consciousness.
Rahul, my family hails from Kashi. My father's family is from Kashi, and we Kashi citizens, we believe that that Lord Shiva himself chose Kashi, and a part of him always remains here. And at least those of us in Kashi, we believe that of the 12 Jyotirlings, Kashi Vishwanath ji, just praying out there is equivalent to praying at all the Jyotirlings. It's a very, very, very important place for all of us Hindus. And you will note that it's one of the few places where from ancient times, even prehistoric times, people from across India have gathered at Kashi, which is why at Kashi you will find quarters from every different part of India. There will be a Telugu quarter, Bengali quarter, Gujarati quarter. Maharani Lakshmibai, she was Maratha, but she was born in Kashi. It has always been the place where India gathered to connect to our Lord, to connect to the Mahadev, to the God of gods.
The Hindu side claims that they've discovered a Shivling in the Wuzu area of the site. Obviously, the statue of Nandi overlooks this particular area, and if you were just to follow her gaze, it's quite clear that it would land on this particular spot. The Muslim petitioners have said that what has been discovered is a fountain, not a Shivling. But aside from this battle of versions, it cannot be denied, and there's enough visual evidence. You don't even need an archaeological survey to decide that a temple was indeed destroyed, and on top of which the Gyanvapi Mosque has come up. Now, given this, do you believe that the Hindus really have an automatic claim over Kashi Vishwanath?
Rahul, I think this should be answered at a few levels. One is the temple itself. There is no doubt that there was a temple there. You only have to Google the images of Gyanvapi Mosque, and those of us who are from Kashi, even in the pre-80s when things were a little more open, we've seen it. We've seen it with our own eyes. Now, of course, with the Dham project, others can see it too. For certain for years it was sealed, but you can Google the images, you can see it. And this was a technique that invaders used not just in India but across the world. You have to realize that most of the ancient world was an idol worshipping world, idol worshipping, nature worshipping, goddess worshipping. Most of these cultures were wiped out violently, largely by two groups, European Christians and Turkish Muslims, who massacred various civilizations out of existence. And what they did in various places, you can read Catherine Nixie's book on the Christian destruction of the classical world. Across the world, what they would do is often what are called pagan temples, idol worshipping temples. They would keep parts of the wall and then build a church or a mosque on top of it as a sign of humiliation, telling the idol worshippers that this is your status. And of course, as you said rightly, Nandi ji continues to look at his Lord. And Nandi ji is the Param Bhakt of Lord Shiva, and all of us will obviously stand behind Lord Shiva, and those of us who would go to pray there would of course look where Nandi ji is looking as well. And Masiri Alamgiri makes it very clear, the records of Aurangzeb, where he very proudly where he spoke of the destruction of Kashi Vishwanath ji and various other temples that Aurangzeb destroyed. So there is no doubt that there was a temple there. The physical evidence is there, the documentary evidence of Aurangzeb's reign is there. On that, there is no doubt. The only question that there was always a doubt on is कि शिवलिंग कहाँ पे है, शिव जी की जो मूर्ति है, जो प्रतिमा है, वो कहाँ पे है? It was always whispered among families in Kashi that the Shivling continues to remain at the Gyanvapi Mosque. But, none of us were sure. And one will wait for the court direction on this. That's as far as, the discussion on as you said, on the temple and the mosque is concerned.
That's interesting, because obviously that would then imply that Hindus have an automatic claim over it. Ram Bhaks have got back their place of worship in Ayodhya, but laws prevent Krishna Bhaks and Shiv Bhaks from reclaiming their place of worship. Isn't this a strange happenstance flowing out of the Places of Worship Act?
I'm not a lawyer. Lawyers will know this, a lot better. But my understanding of the situation is that it may not necessarily be so clear. Section 4 of the 1991 Act leaves space for interpretation. But it's better if a lawyer comments on it.
I can understand that. One of the reasons that a large number of individuals sort of are agitating, for the lack of a better word, against any change in status quo is because they say that the reclamation of the site will disturb the peace. Now, do you believe that the onus of maintaining communal harmony in our country devolves only upon Hindus without exception?
Rahul, I'm living in the West, right? I'm in London, so I may not have seen many of the reports that have come out in India. But in the West, there are conversations happening, Black Lives Matter conversations against slavers, such as Cecil Rhodes, where statues have been removed. I think that in the West, it's good that these conversations are happening. At times, I think in the West, it is unfortunate that the conversation is becoming vitiated. That is not ideal. But look, the mind might tell you that move forward, but the wisdom of the heart tells you that unless there is peace born out of truth, the poison remains. There's a reason why one of the greatest human beings of the last century, President Nelson Mandela, put together the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, where the past was spoken of honestly. The side which may have committed those crimes sought forgiveness. The side which had suffered gave forgiveness, and the matter was resolved. Look, the thing is that truth is the best disinfectant, and the thing that the past does not impact us, we all know that's not real. And Black Lives Matter, does impact the West. Even the Shia Muslims. Till today, they mourn the assassination of the terrible and sad assassination of Hassan and Hussein. I have Shia friends, I have Sunni friends. There are some Sunnis who do get uncomfortable at times. The Hassan and Hussein were assassinated by Yazid.
Yes.
But many of my wise Sunni friends say that this is a terrible thing that happened, and the Shias have a right to feel at least that pain. The only thing is that, yes, there should not be hatred and dissonance in the modern day, because modern people have done nothing. And I would like to emphasize once again, Aurangzeb was a foreigner. Who we call the Mughals, they call themselves Timurid. You see their royal seals, they never saw Babur as their ancestor. They were very clear. The founder of their dynasty was Temur. They were all foreigners. So this is not an issue, and I would like to propose that this is not a Hindu-Muslim issue. This is a foreigner Indian issue. And if we have to look even at the foreigners of that era, why look at Aurangzeb, who destroyed so many temples, and New York Times called him one of the worst mass murderers in history. New York Times is a left wing newspaper, let's be honest. But they put Aurangzeb as among the worst mass murderers in history. And at the same time as Aurangzeb, there was Dara Shikoh, who had come to Kashi Vishwanath ji to learn Sanskrit there. Now, I would look to, as an Indian, I would look to Dara Shikoh as a role model to follow, rather than Aurangzeb.
And yet, you have, as I'm talking in the context of who should be supremely tasked in this country, if anyone, with maintaining the peace, you have provocateurs. You have people who say, like Akbaruddin Owaisi and others, who pay tribute to Aurangzeb at his tomb. So, coming back to that question, is the onus only upon Hindus to constantly sort of, contain their own perhaps disaffections or what have you? Or should the onus now also fall upon other communities to, we don't have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and that's sad. But in the absence of that, I think some of the virtue signalers perhaps must rework this point of view that they sort of thrust out there, that only Hindus are responsible for maintaining peace in this country.
Rahul, Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb means mutual respect. It must be from both sides. And I would argue that there are enough people on all communities who do think of India as their homeland and do want peace. You mentioned Ram Janmabhoomi ji being rebuilt, and one of the archaeologists, one of the historians who made that possible was K.K. Mohammed, a Muslim from Kerala. And I would look to him as a role model. I don't want to comment on politicians. Politicians will do what politicians do. But I'll be honest, I mean, as an Indian, worshipping at Aurangzeb's grave is a bit like going to Israel and worshipping at Hitler, and praising Hitler out there. Come on, this is not done. But I would argue very strongly that we must not create hatred in the modern day. Let's look at fine individuals like K.K. Mohammed, who's a devout Muslim from Kerala, whose work helped Hindus rebuild Ram Janmabhoomi ji, and this to me is what India can be. There is a very, very difficult history that we have to contend with. We must understand that it is not that it happened only in India. The Turkic Muslims and the European Christians were the most aggressive and violent group in human history.
Yes.
Perhaps in the history of life itself. Very few groups have massacred so many people. Timur killed 5% of the world's population. Timur, the founder of Aurangzeb's dynasty, he killed 5% of the world's population. When it wasn't so easy to kill 5% of the world's population, there were no weapons of mass destruction, no nuclear bombs, no dynamite. You have to stab, behead. It was difficult to kill people. Now, these two groups were exceptionally violent groups. That's a reality. And they were exceptionally violent with each other as well, by the way. Now, the fallout of these massacres exists across the world. In America, they wiped out civilizations. In Europe, Central Asia, they wiped out civilizations. In Africa, they did it everywhere. And the only thing is that in most other places like the Aztecs or, the pagan Greco-Romans or the Celts, they've been wiped out. But in India, we are still here, right? So we feel that pain. Now, there has to be some way to reconcile this really terrible history. Will Durant had said that, an American historian, that the Turkic invasion of India is perhaps the bloodiest in human history. I would repeat once again, it has nothing to do with Indian Muslims today. 95% of Indian Muslims are Paswanda Muslims. It has nothing to do with Indian Muslims today. Just like, speaking of the crimes of the British Raj, has nothing to do with the British today. It's wrong for me to hate today's British for what Robert Clive or Winston Churchill may have done. It's not the fault of today's British, but we must speak the truth of what happened in the British Raj so that we can make peace with it as Indians, and the same with the Turkic invaders as well.
You talk about reconciling our history. then what do you make of the claim that this move to seek access to our history via, let's say, Kashi Vishwanath temple is an attack on Muslims, Muslim rights, and is intended to reduce Muslims to the status of second-class citizens in a Hindu-majority India?
I wouldn't agree with that. You can take the example of, I'm a diplomat, so I will answer this a little carefully. But in Turkey, Hagia Sophia was converted back into a mosque. There was no process, there was no court, there was no consultation with Orthodox Christians. You saw Christians from Europe, including even the Pope, who voiced their disapproval of this. Whereas in a liberal majority country, a dharmic majority country like India, Hindus go through courts, they go through a proper process. Secondly, if you look at across the subcontinent, there are only two countries where the proportion of minority population has not declined in the last 70 years. You know what has happened in Pakistan, where Christians, Hindus, Sikhs, all have been wiped out. In Afghanistan. In India, the proportion of minorities have gone up. So I say India takes care of its minorities, and essentially minorities vote with their feet. Hindus, Christians, Sikhs are escaping from Afghanistan and Pakistan to come to India. Rohingya Muslims from Burma come to India. They don't carry on. If India was so terrible for Muslims, then the Rohingya Muslims would carry onwards to Pakistan, right? They don't. Because India is actually a decent liberal country. This is not about today's Muslims or Hindus. This is about Aurangzeb. And I would frame the debate once again in this is not about Hindu Muslims. This is about a foreigner and Indians. And this foreign group, the Turkic group, carried out these crimes not just in India but across the world. They were the military superpower of the world from the 12th to the 17th century, and they massacred people across the world.
Yes.
Much of Timur's crimes, by the way, were done in Iran, where he massacred large numbers of people, even in some parts of the Arab world, by the way. And they are all from they're not actually originally from Turkey. They're all from Central Asia originally.
That, I think, is a very important point that you've made, and I think that steers the debate in a slightly different direction. Nonetheless, let me come back to some of the questions. Now, there are also those, and you've talked about reconciling history and, of course, the importance of truth as a disinfectant. But there are people who say, let's put a stop. Let's not go back in time. How far will you go back? Why do you want to reopen old wounds? If that were the case, and I'm asking you, it seems a bit illogical to me, because how would you then study, for example, the history of caste discrimination in our country? Or any number of other social issues which have had an impact on groups, society, created fissures, bad blood, resentment. So I ask, shouldn't historical wrongs also be exposed so that societies reach a mean, a point of balance?
Rahul, and I would agree with you. I would just use a slightly lower energy word, maybe a calmer word. We don't need to say expose, we just need to say truth.
Okay.
And you spoke rightly of caste atrocities, and they were terrible. And they have been spoken of honestly. And India to look at the historical wrongs has actually carried out the largest affirmative action or positive discrimination program in human history in the last 70 years for the backward caste, scheduled caste.
And we've also had a democratic revolution. So, you've empowered a large number of lower castes, given them a voice if not
Absolutely.
a role.
Yes, we have the first full-term backward caste prime minister in Indian history now. Many of these things have, and truth actually helped, didn't it?
Yes.
Truth helped in this case. So why will the truth not help in other cases, right? And it's a learning for us. And I would argue once again that if you again look at Black Lives Matter, look at other cases where actually there is no.
So here it is then, on principle. Let me ask you, on principle then, if there is something like the Places of Worship Act that stalls various communities from accessing their truth and reconciling to it, then in principle, do you think it should be around? Just in principle, forget about the law, etc., just in principle.
Look, you know, this is actually a broader principle. Because it's not about this specific act, it's about the structure of the constitution and the law itself. The constitution is very clear.
Yes.
Sovereignty lies with the people, and the people, the organ of state that represents the people is the parliament, no other organ. The organ of state that represents the people is the parliament nationally, and are the legislative assemblies in the state. And the people will speak through the parliament or the legislative assembly, through their representatives. So, and they have a right to amend, make or amend any laws as they deem fit. The sovereignty lies with the people. That's a structure of the constitution we have chosen.
We leave it at that. Amish Tripathi, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. You've been extremely upfront with your point of view here. Thank you very much. Let's catch up perhaps a little later in the week when we have more clarity on the Places of Worship Act itself. We are awaiting a court direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.